The 32X is a rather bad rap, mainly due to people who don't understand the circumstances surrounding its failure. The system was released and had what was considered a successful launch, only to be cancelled a year later so that Sega could focus all their resources on putting the failing Sega Saturn on life support. The situation surrounding the Genesis, 32X, Sega CD, and Saturn is one of the more unfortunate blunders in gaming history. But this isn't about those consoles. This is about the games that were developed yet never released due to the system's early and unexpected exit from the console market. This is Retro Impressions, and we are looking at unreleased games for the 32X. When it comes to the 32X, more games were cancelled than released by a sizable margin, so expect this to be an ongoing series. There are a few things to note before we get started. This is mostly going to be alphabetic. I say mostly because if I miss a game or someone brings one I didn't know about to my attention, I will include it in a future episode. There is also at least one instance where it makes more sense to discuss the games of a developer rather than each by itself. The rules for inclusion are simple. There has to be some proof that the game was in development, be it an article in a magazine, known copy of a prototype, a retail order sheet, an interview with a developer, etc. With that, let's get going. 32 Extreme was developed in-house by Sega. It featured 4 sports including snowboarding, roller hockey, jet ski racing, and frisbee golf. It was described as a 32-bit version of the NES classic California games, a style of game the Genesis and 32X lacked. The game previewed in a few magazines with a fairly detailed look at the jet ski racing bit, leading me to believe it was the most complete of the 4. This game, like many on the list, was cancelled along with the system. Black Angel was started as a Genesis game in 1992 by the newly formed American-based Sega Midwest studio. Work on the game was paused as Sega of America shifted focus to releasing a game for most major sports. Midwest Studios was tasked with creating a hockey game and porting the popular arcade fighter World Heroes to the Genesis. With the 32X gearing up for release, Sega again shifted gears and assigned Midwest Studios to the new console. The team was split in two, with each half taking the responsibility for one game. Aftershock was set in a dystopian Los Angeles where the player controlled a group of mercenaries in search for the source of a mutant infestation. It took gameplay inspiration from Jungle Strike and allowed players to drive, fly, and cycle around the stage. The other team resumed work on Black Angel. It was a shooter that could switch views on the fly between side-scrolling and three-quarter perspective. Aftershock had a working demo, storyboards, and a finished script, while Black Angel never made it out of the alpha stage before Sega closed the studio's doors in early 1995. The closure had nothing to do with the system or what looked to be two promising games, but rather Sega Midwest Studios' gross mismanagement of funds, a mismanagement that caused a loss of faith in Sega of America for that studio to produce new games on schedule and at a profit. The lead designer for Aftershock has stated that he has a working prototype for the game, along with all the design documentation, making a real possibility of seeing gameplay footage at some point in the future. Alien Trilogy has a lot of rumors surrounding it without many facts. It's known that a 32X version was being worked on, even appearing on a release list in Game Player's magazine. The game wouldn't ship until after the 32X was cancelled, appearing on the Saturn, PSX, and PC near the end of 1996. It was fairly well received, showing heavy inspiration from the Doom series, something the 32X had shown itself very capable of running. One oddity of the game is it only uses one of the Saturn's 2 SH2 processors. The same processor set was also included with the 32X. There's been a bit of debate about what exact version of AVP was shipping for the 32X. It's not really a mystery though, it was the popular Capcom arcade beat-em-up. The Super Nintendo did receive its own AVP game, but it's not related to this one and people mostly hated it. The Jaguar also received an Alien vs Predator game that was well received, but again, unrelated to Capcom's classic. The unfortunate bit about this cancellation is that the developer didn't shift the game to a new system and we never received a home port. The port of the PC game Alone in the Dark 2 to the 32X has a rather interesting story. It seemed ready for release but was delayed due to a battle over the rights for distribution. Once the legal stuff was cleared up, it saw release on a number of systems including the Saturn, 3DO, and PSX. The reception was mostly negative, with people considering it so bad that the Saturn release must be a janky port of the 32X version. Biosphere was a game in development for the 32X, 3DO, PC, and Jaguar CD. Information about the company's fate is hard to come by. Thankfully, we have some info giving a bit of insight into this game, including a sales flyer sent out to potential retailers. You live in a biodome on Earth, and that dome is failing. The developer Zinc Studio described their game as an action-adventure with puzzle elements. Nearing the Winter CES show of 1995, the game was still under development, with some consideration of putting together a demo for the show. There was also serious consideration given to E3 of that same year. Although the development team has stated that their game was nearing release, what we were left with are some screenshots as the game was never shown in public. The arcade version of Batman Forever utilized Sega's Titan architecture, an arcade board that used the same SH2 processors as the 32X and Saturn. This system is so similar to the 32X and Saturn that releasing a game for the Titan typically meant a home version was also in the works. The game shipped in November of 1996, missing the 32X by nearly a year. The game wasn't well received, and for the most part, has been forgotten about. A few years ago, the original developer for the story of Thor, also known as Beyond Oasis, confirmed that planning had started on a sequel to the legendary Mega Drive game. Unfortunately, this game was cancelled with the system. The good news is we still ended up with a prequel for the Saturn known as The Story of Thor 2 or The Legend of Oasis. Beyond Zero Tolerance is a sequel to the Mega Drive exclusive Zero Tolerance. It was a Doom-style game that featured two-player networked co-op play, something that was quite revolutionary for the time. My friend Historic Nerd covered this in more detail on his channel, a video I highly recommend you watch once you're done here. Anyways, the sequel was being developed for both the Mega Drive and 32X. Although not official, I assume the game was cancelled when Sega put an end to all 4th generation systems near the end of 1995. Eventually, the developer of the game released the unfinished Mega Drive version of Beyond Zero Tolerance along with the prequel for free. Boogerman was another scheduled release for the 32X. The original wasn't a commercial hit, and this most likely would have been a definitive or enhanced version of the original Genesis release. Beyond that, not much else is known. Castlevania The Bloodletting was announced early on for the 32X and Genesis, with an intended release date of late 1996 to early 1997. It was set to follow Rondo of Blood both chronologically and in style. This game is notable for two things. First, for being one of two unreleased Castlevania games on a Sega platform. Second is for shaping the series going forward. When Konami experienced the unexpected success of their dating sim, Tokimeki Memorial, they offered the scenario writer for that project, Koji Igarashi, his choice of project to work on next. He chose to become involved with the Castlevania series. Although Bloodletting never released, Igarashi would continue on with the series, shaping it by writing and directing its best-known games. He would stick with Konami until 2014, when he would finally leave to start his own development studio. His first game is the spiritual successor to the Castlevania series called Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night. So, what happened to the 32X game? With the unexpected discontinuation of both Sega systems, the project was cancelled. Igarashi, along with most of that team and resources, were transferred to a new Castlevania game, the legendary Symphony of the Night. When Interplay announced Clay Fighters 2 for the 32X, they promised more moves, new characters, and a faster game that didn't suffer from the slowdown seen in its SNES counterpart. All this sounded promising, especially to myself, who was a huge fan of the original game. Although it never released, undumped copies are known to be among collectors, making the possibility of someday playing this game higher than most. College basketball's national championship, hosted by Billy Parker, is another interesting game that was extremely close to release. So close, in fact, that it had received a rating from the ESRB, and Sega had started to advertise it on the back of 32X game manuals. Unfortunately, beyond the advert and a 3-second clip shown during a 32X preview, not much else is known about the game. Converse City Balter, also known as Converse Hardcore Hoops, was a game in development by Virgin Interactive for just about every active system in the mid-90s, including the 32X. Although details are slim, we know it was an animated streetball game. There were 12 characters and a number of levels, all hand-drawn, consisting of over 15,000 frames of animation. I imagine it being a cross between Sega's Comic Zone and their prior streetball game, Jam It. Have you ever played that awful game for the Sega CD called Lawnmower Man? What if I told you that they not only released an equally awful sequel on the PC and PlayStation, but also started a port to the 32X? The game called Cyber War required 2 discs on the PlayStation, and it's doubtful the conversion to the 32X would have done the system any justice. Darksider was developed by Rocket Science as a game that put the player on a full motion on-rails ride. I imagine it was similar to Lodestar by the way it was described. Lodestar didn't sell well, and eventually this game was cancelled. I wouldn't be surprised if one had something to do with the other, as Rocket Science has stated Darksider was too similar to one of their existing games as the reason for cancellation. With the success of Darkstalkers in the arcade, Capcom wasted little time starting on a port for the 32X. Unfortunately, no information exists about the port beyond the fact that it was in development, then cancelled alongside the 32X. The game and the series is widely popular, making it available on a number of platforms. Daytona USA is one of the most iconic Sega racing games, and one of the few that was not only planned for the 32X, but also the Genesis by using the SVP chip, much like Virtual Racing did. The game would eventually release for the Saturn in what is widely considered a lackluster port. As far as I'm aware, the game has received additional ports, but nothing worthy of the arcade release. Descent was a revolutionary first-person shooter for the PC released on December 31st, 1994, with a port to Sega's 32X being announced shortly after. With the demise of the system, the port was moved to the Saturn, and new ports started for the PlayStation and Panasonic's new M2. Out of the 4 consoles that the game was in development for, only the PlayStation would see it released. Duel is a bit of an odd case. It was originally showcased in Meme Machine's issue 20, where the writer tells the reader it's an upcoming 32X game, then proceeds to share their hands-on experience with it. The game was to be a post-apocalyptic beat-em-up using real actors. In 2014, a rough video of the demo was uploaded to YouTube, leading to speculation that this was just meant as a tech demo and nothing else. Personally, I lean heavy on the side that this was actually a game for 2 reasons. First off, this article is based on the writer's first-hand account of seeing the demo and their discussion with the developers at Activision. The other major part is Meme Machines showcase tech demos all the time and called them as such. It's highly doubtful that they would break their own protocol here. Beyond this, nothing else is known. Another game announced with no additional info was Dynamite Headdy. Chances are it was an enhanced port of the Genesis release, a release designed to grab easy sales on a system that wasn't crowded with games. That's it for now. Let me know what you thought of this and if you would like to see the series continue on. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Feel free to leave a positive or negative comment letting me know your thoughts. If you'd like to chat or keep updated with what's happening on this channel, reach out to me on Twitter at Jenovi. And until next time, this has been Retro Impressions.